Hi everyone. Surely many of our viewers, inspired by some films, dreamed of having gills to breathe underwater. Of course, it's unlikely that gills will suddenly grow in your neck, but breathing underwater is not so unrealistic nowadays. There are actually several ways to help you breathe underwater, but we want to warn you at once. Don't try to repeat these tricks yourself. They can be life-threatening. It's better to just start training your lungs. Inflate your lungs with air, hold your breath, and go ahead. First, let's find out how long you can stay underwater without floating to the surface, and how long you can't spend without breathing. Humanity is now exploring two very important global spheres, the deep space and the deep ocean. And for this, it would certainly help us to know how to behave in such an airless environment. The human body is designed in such a way that we can't simply stop breathing by our own desire. For example, sea turtles, unlike humans, breathe more consciously. Deep breathing allows them to stay underwater for several hours, but we don't have that ability. And why would we need it when we already invented the scuba set many years ago? Although it is a fairly large and uncomfortable equipment, also quite expensive, and the air supply in it is pretty limited. Therefore, scientists today continue to look for new ways to dive into the water without scuba gear. They develop artificial gills, invent materials and devices capable of extracting oxygen right from the water. To date, there are truly innovative discoveries. However, there are also ancient but still effective methods. The truth is that both are potentially dangerous, and it's best not to risk your health by trying them in the nearest pond. It turns out that one way to breathe underwater without special equipment was already known in ancient times. Previously, people used a device commonly called a diving bell or a diving bubble. This is a type of empty container turned upside down. For example, a barrel or a bucket. With vertical diving, the pressure inside the container of this type corresponds to the pressure of the surrounding water, and the resulting airspace allows you to breathe for a while underwater. Remember the Pirates of the Caribbean scene where the main characters were at the bottom under an empty boat? So this example demonstrates this principle. The diving bell is one of the oldest and simplest designs for studying the underwater world. The first immersion in the primitive bell is attributed to Alexander the Great himself. The device allowed the commander to study the underwater fences of the Phoenicians, and perhaps helped him to achieve one of the most amazing military victories. Later, divers began to wear bell-shaped helmets, and in the 19th century, some inventors improved the design, and the new invention has already become the prototype of a modern scuba wetsuit. It's worth noting that these slightly modified diving bells are still in use today. The historical process of creating diving equipment was developed in the direction of maintaining a certain volume of air around the person's head. For this, even leather bags and glass balls with an oxygen reserve for breathing were tested. Also, the pearl hunters and treasure hunters of sunken ships knew how to breathe underwater with the help of leather bottles. They were the first to use such containers for long dives. The principle of operation of such a simple device is as follows. The person makes breathing movements with the chest to constantly update the air in the lungs. With each breath, he needs a supply of fresh oxygen. Breathing for a long time in a closed cycle, i.e. inhaling the air from the same container, is impossible. It is clear that in such a dense bag, the air must be changed from time to time, or simply have some inlet for fresh portions of oxygen. Therefore, the air supply in this device will last a short time, but they could still catch a couple of pearly shells. The swimming mask and breathing tube are perhaps the easiest and most accessible devices for a long underwater stay. The first breathing tube was a hollow cane stem, which the Indians used to hunt underwater. Also, as material for the tube, straw or reed was used. However, this method was not only suitable for hunting, but also used by Indians to hide from enemies. Although in this way, it was possible to go down into the water only 1.5 meters. This is due to the structure of the lungs, the small air vent for the air, and the position of the Indians in the water with these tubes. When you dive deeper, you're in an uncomfortable position, and the lungs are not able to function normally. Along with this, the water pressure increased, which also made breathing difficult. But nowadays, the swimming snorkel is a perfect device, designed with the most diverse physiological and technical requirements in mind. Such simple equipment allows you to swim to a depth of no more than 5 to 10 meters, but this is enough to spend some time in an interesting and amusing way. Of all the modern tools that allow you to stay underwater for a really long time, only the scuba diving set is used, but it's a pretty complicated device. Experts say it's not easy to create a scuba diving suit at home. For this, it's necessary to have the proper knowledge and be able to work with a lathe. But it's quite possible to make a prototype with your own hands. And on the internet, you can find many ways to do it. For example, using a pump sprayer. If you didn't know how these things work, pay attention to the screen. The design of the invention is simple, and its assembly generally doesn't take much time. The sprayer is equipped with weights, fixed with adhesive tape, so that the load doesn't come up to the surface due to its light weight. The air fills the container by means of a pump, and after that, all that remains is to place the device on the back, and that's it. When the diver needs a new portion of oxygen, he simply inhales through a valve that's connected by a hose to an air reservoir. Sure, this idea is pretty crazy, but according to the laws of physics, it should work. However, professional divers are advised not to use homemade devices and not to expose themselves to danger, especially at great depths. So don't take any chances, please. Unfortunately, in the process of evolution, people have not learned to breathe underwater. That's why science had to cut in. And today, scientists around the world are trying hard to find a way to give us the opportunity to breathe freely underwater and dive deep without having to use bulky scuba gear. Some are working on the creation of artificial gills for humans, others looking for ways to extract oxygen directly from the water. But so far, everything is in the development and refinement stage, and what inventions will be available to the public is not yet known. For example, they say that researchers in Denmark created a material that can absorb, store, and release large amounts of oxygen. If someone assembles a breathing apparatus of this material, they will draw oxygen directly from the water. Sounds impressive. At the same time, the material can absorb and release oxygen many times, which will allow us to immerse ourselves in water for a long time. Now, can you imagine making a special mask of this material? It could provide the diver with oxygen from the surrounding space without the need for extra equipment. Cool, right? According to scientists, this material can store 3 times more oxygen than a diving tank with the same volume. And at the same time, it's also capable of producing oxygen directly from the water. That sounds pretty progressive. The only thing left to do is to wait for this miraculous material to go on sale, if that ever really happens, of course. To finally proudly declare to the world, now we can breathe underwater, scientists have been developing amazing devices. So, back in 1976, biochemists in the United States created a fantastic device capable of regenerating the oxygen in the water and providing the diver with it. The device was more like a small spaceship for one person, but with enough battery capacity, the diver could stay and breathe at a depth for almost an infinite amount of time. However, this is not the main goal of scientists. Their dream is not a breathing device. They actually want to teach humans how to use fluids.
You know what? Bye, guys. Bye-bye, peeps. Bye, peeps.